Welcome to the Esports Research Report presented by myself, Dr. Brian McCauley, here at Jönköping University in Sweden, and produced by Nicholas Hendelkens, Communications Lead for the Esports Research Network. Today we're talking to PhD candidate Clément Thillier, who's a PhD
Hello.
candidate at Paris Cité University. And Clément, before you introduce yourself, I will name your paper because it's a mouthful. Effects of high intensity interval training and cognitive motor training on in-game performance, cognitive functions, and physiological outcomes in professional League of Legends and Valorant players. So welcome to the podcast, Clément. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello. First, thank you very much for bringing me here to this podcast. So, as you explained very well, I'm working at Paris University, and I worked since 3 years because I'm at last year in PhD student as a PhD student, and I'm working on professional League of Legends and Valorant player. The main idea of that paper was to look at how we can improve in-game performance in a professional context. We saw that usually in a lot of the literature, there is a lack of study in terms of professional esports player, and specifically when we are looking at their in-game performance. So the idea was to look after how a structured physical or cognitive training could improve first cognitive or physical variable, and then to understand how this improvement may have an impact on their in-game performance.
Okay, so just to go back to start here, just for everyone, high intensity interval training is what exactly?
So the idea, like when you talk about high intensity interval training, is to have a short bout of cardiovascular exercise that are like spaced with a period of rest, and you want to increase your heart rate variability or your heart rate around like 75 to 90% of your maximal heart rate. So that would be the idea. We thought about this kind of exercise because when you are talking about professional sport player that you usually don't have much time during the day because of the practice. So the idea would be to design a workout to challenge the cardiovascular system without taking too much away from their practice.
And for like most of us who do walk, run on the treadmill, that's how they do it. But the one that most people mightn't be aware of in their normal lives is cognitive motor training, or CMT. What is that?
Yeah, when you look at the literature, it's pretty known at the moment that high intensity interval training will have an impact on cognitive function or executive function, reaction time, working memory, etc. And recently, there is a new kind of training that works specifically on having a motor exercise, for example, catching balls or doing some movement with your hands or with your arms, while having a cognitive need at the same time, having a cognitive demanding task at the same time. And we looked at the effect it could have on the brain, specifically like improving the improving the activation into different neuronal pathway, and it could have an impact into making sure you are improving on specific cognitive demand and specific executive function performance. So the idea, for example, would have to have a specific movement with your hands while recite the alphabet in normal order or in reverse order, or having to catch balls while touching different balls depending on the colors, this kind of stuff.
I think doing the alphabet backwards, when we see it on TV in America, when the cops pull the people over, I always think, sober or drunk, that's a hard task. So for this study, you chose League of Legends and Valorant, right? So why did you choose those particular games? And there are MOBA and an FPS, so they're quite distinct.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that was the first idea. First, they are two of the most structured and competitive esports ecosystem in the world, so it would like a pretty good baseline to start the research with. And secondly, as you said, it's like pretty different. It places different demand on the players. League of Legends as a MOBA with a strong macro resources and role-based demand will mainly focus on working memory, decision making, while on the opposite, Valorant has a tactical FPS with strong round-based perpetual and precision demand. Will mainly increase the reaction time and the ability to take decision making under pressure with in a very short bout of time to react. So the idea when we like the chance we have when we focus on this specific training on these two different game is to understand how it's gonna impact their performance, where they have like really different competitive demand on the highest European level, and it was also like uh, a pretty good use we have just because like I'm working at Kamen Corp, and so it was like two of the main team we had here. So that was like the perfect balance we could have.
I mean, you're talking to the world's only scientifically proven not so good Valorant player, according to a paper did in 2025. The way you describe it sounds like at my age, 45, I should have gone with League of Legends. So on that, like, what were the main hypotheses you wanted to test? What were the things you were saying was going to happen, and you wanted to test it?
Mm. So the funny positive we had was that it would primarily improve like cardiovascular outcome, while the cognitive motor training will produce larger benefit on executive function. And overall, we expected that both the intervention with different pathway or different mechanism will support or improve in-game performance. So more broadly, like the whole project will build on the idea that e-sport performance is multidimensional. So if we want to understand training effects properly, we need to look at specifically in-game performance, but also how the cognitive and physiological outcome together like evolve around the in-game performance.
Okay, and so you designed training protocols, right, for these players. So how did you manage to design these training protocols?
Yeah, I mean, we faced like a really specific like limitation or problematic, or call it how you want, while we to build this project, because like the main idea was to work on professional sport player. We saw in different study that usually all the interventional project has been done or made on amateur player, uh, without all the environmental limitation we could face when we are with professional who like face a lot of time to practice video games, who don't want to train, who have like a pretty short time to train, or this kind of stuff. So the idea was to build a protocol where we have like a single case experimental design study, just because we won't have any like control group, because the whole 10 players will have we'll have like a specific training. And the idea is to have half of the training we're going to start with the it, and the other half we're going to start with the cognitive motor training, and they will have like a crossover design after 1 month, so we could check exactly which intervention would have which effect on specific or like cognitive or physical or in-game performance. So the idea was that both interventions were delivered twice a week and had similar duration, which help us to compare the both intervention. A typical 8 session will start with a short warm up and then move progressively into 3 cardiovascular circuit training. So something that could look like a bit like CrossFit. So something around like strength exercise with a high cardiovascular demand, around 70 to 90% of your individual heart rate, maximum heart rate. And the typical cognitive motor training would last around 21 minutes and included 6 different dual task exercise. So that combine specific movement with cognitive demand, such as inhibition, working memory, task switching, processing, and with a difficulty that is progressing over time. So we make sure that no matter the thresholds that are reaching, we can still make the task harder and harder.
Well, at what point in every session did a player turn and look at you and say, "I hate you for this. Why did I sign up for this?" I mean, that sounds like very, very difficult.
Yeah.
Was there a lot of regrets during it? That did they go, "This is hard. I can't believe you're making me do this"?
I mean, actually, it's a really good question, because it's not something that I put in this paper, because this paper only look at the result in terms of cognitive, in-game, and physiological variable. But after every like training, I've asked the player the physical difficulty they had during the training, and I asked the player the fun and enjoyment they had during the training. It's probably something for like another paper that where I want to look a bit more of the psychological aspect and social aspect of the player. But the short conclusion I can give about this one is that usually a lot of them hated the HIIT training but loved the cognitive motor training because it looks way more like what they can face every day when play League of Legends or when playing Valorant. But the more they were doing the HIIT training, the more they fed the benefit, and the more I had like good and positive rating on the enjoyment at the end. So I would say it's just a matter of understanding when they are doing that and enjoying the moment.
Like
Finally,
like a runner's high in a marathon. I hate
yeah,
this. I hate, oh,
exactly.
I suddenly love this. Yeah, I can see it when you start back in the gym. First few sessions are horrible, and then after a while you start to enjoy it. Yeah,
Yeah,
and I know
exactly.
esport professional players. Like I've talked to coaches and stuff, and they're like, I can't get that kid to eat broccoli. So what kind of physiological and cognitive markers did you measure?
So for the cognitive one, we use this like a well-established test that is called the dots task, where the player had like two different color on a screen and had to click on A or E depending on the color they see. So we looked mainly at different conditions when the color are on the same side that is congruent, or what they are switching that is not switching or unswitching, and we look at the mean reaction times they have in all the condition, the accuracy they have, and more specifically, the Simon score will give us the inhibitory focus they will have when they are doing a task. Um, when we're looking at the physiological part, we measured everything related to heart rate variability, so basal heart rate variability, and a bit more like the low frequency to high frequency ratio to have like a measurement of their recovery overall and how they adapt to the kind of training they are doing.
Just anecdotally, were some players much more capable with the physically fit and adapted quicker to the hit training, and versus some players who really might have had the traditional vision of an esports player,
Yeah.
couch potato type.
Yeah, this is exactly like the main point also of doing it on professional player. Is just because like we could see that during the whole time we made the protocol that a lot of players had a lot of limitation to recover well based on the fact that their sleep quality was pretty bad, that sleep quantity was pretty bad, what they are eating was also like a lot of different variable that was hard to take into account, and that was reducing the effect of our training, and that it just added more important to the fact that we are working in an ecological ecosystem. So yeah, to answer like more directly, we could see that there is a lot of individual variability between players just because they are not recovering the same way, just because they are not controlling all the different aspects of their lifestyle the same way.
Yeah, I mean, so based on your findings, what would you sort of say that actual active research or active professional coaches or performance staff take away from your research?
Yeah, I think there is like three important takeaway. First is that structured out of game training seems really worth integrating, even at the highest level, and more. I would say even more important at the highest level. Second is that the most meaningful outcome will not always be a dramatic increase in terms of in-game performance. I will answer a bit this one a bit more importantly because we could see that there is an improvement in terms of reaction time, specifically on the inhibitory process. So this is something that could be really important, no
Wait,
matter the
wait.
kind of training.
So wait, you're talking about people who are at insane reaction times already, probably top 1-2%
Yes,
of the human
exactly.
population. You're seeing improvements.
Exactly. That's the main idea. We saw that there is no threshold effect based on the fact that they are already a pretty good reaction time. They could still improve based on the two different kind of training we did. So that will make the structured the structured training worth integrating. Second thing is, even though we saw a little improvement in terms of cognitive performance, the main idea behind it is that we also at the same time saw a huge increasement in terms of environmental stressors they could face. When you are looking at the trend they had during the baseline level compared to the first and second training intervention, we could see that the trend was going like pretty low, and we could expect like a decreasement of performance over time. the cognitive and physical training help to reduce and even help to improve. And that will give to the third takeaway we would have is that at the end we saw like a really high individual individual response difference in terms of individual response between all the 10 different players when you look at first the difference between games, and then within the game when you look at the difference across the role. So I think it's really important to have in mind that we should avoid a one size fits all model and think in terms of player specific need first, depending on their usual habits. We talked about it before about the recovery and how about the time they have to sleep, to diet, etc. In terms of game specific need, when we talk about League of Legends and Valorant, and within the game about a role specific needs that will lead to different programming in terms either in physical activity, it for example, or in terms of cognitive activity with the cognitive motor training.
So this is like professional football, marginal gains, tailored programs. I'm an Arsenal fan. It's a lot of stuff I listen to in podcasts about football, and so obviously I could ask this, but I'm going to say that you would think physical and cognitive motor training should become standard in pro teams, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I will say it's something that I mean that was what the main goal of the study, right? Is to prove that everything we are doing actually in sport is mainly based on empirical stuff, based on sport or based on like other kind of cognitive games such as chess or this kind of stuff. But I would say it's really important to implement it into the professional world of sport. But I wouldn't say as a generic checkbox. I think it's really important that we include structured physical and cognitive motor training as part of the standard performance environment. And our result also show that it support performance durability, cognitive sharpness, and physiological adaptation. But it's really important that we focus on individualization and we integrate it like intelligently and smartly into the competitive schedule. It's very important to see the period where we need to work on specific like into specific overall adaptation with e-training, for example, or with specific physical activity, and we focus on specific short-term adaptation of depending on the game demand in terms of cognitive function, in terms of executive function, working memory, and in specific timing within the competitive schedule, having a recovery timing that is really important. I mean, something that we showed a bit within our result is that for some players, uh, when you look at the single case individual result, we could see that players who had like higher stressor than the other, just because they are the in-game leader in Valorant, for example, will have like cognitive impairment during the cognitive task once you compare to other roles that will have a cognitive improvement. So the idea is to understand that for some different role, you would not train the same way. And if players are reaching a point where their recovery is lower, having a physical activity could decrease their performance even worse. So the main idea would really to keep in mind the competitive schedule, keep in mind the recovery timing we will need, and the actual game demand to build something that is completely adapted to their needs.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it's so funny that there's more emphasis on professional levels, and there's so many good researchers working on this stuff, but it's so hard to get this stuff into esports. I mean, it's quicker than it got into
Yeah.
football over the existence of the context. I mean, so what's next steps for your research?
I think there is two different kind of next step that we can highlight. First is if we keep on going into the effect of training, I would like to train the same training on different esport first game. I would like to train it on Rocket League player, on RTS player, StarCraft 2, that will have like different cognitive demand once again. The other model I would like to try is to change a bit the kind of training I did. We did 4 weeks of high intensity, 4 weeks of cognitive motor training, and we crossed it over to see if there is an effect of one rather than the other, or if like the cumulative effect of both could be important. But I will also see like if we are doing both the training at the same time, if we would reach the same effect, or if it would have been like impaired or increased. I would like to see a bit more like the concomitant effect of this two kind of training. And the second aspect will be we'll focus a bit more on the relationship between the variable, because at the moment we only looked at the effect of the training on in game, on physical, on cognitive, but we didn't look at the effect on all the variable, how they interact each other. Do the players improve in game because they improve physically, or does they improve the cognitive because they improve their heart rate variability? And I mean, this is actually my work on my third article, but that will be something we want to reach out. So at the end, when we are building a whole program, we understand exactly why is it important and the mechanism behind it.
Okay, so I'm going to go for a final question here. If you could design the ideal training environment for a pro esports team, what would that include?
Hmm. So first, I would say it's obviously include like structured gameplay practice. That's something I wouldn't go against. I think the main core stuff you would like to put place into when you are building like the perfect environment. And you would be smart around how you want to build the whole recovery process and the whole training process around it, and like the support system that you will build around it, uh, including physical training or cognitive motor training, both concomitant or not, with regular monitoring of all the variables that made our study really like volatile, I would say, such as monitoring the sleep, monitoring the stress, the recovery, all the autonomic marker that make us having doubt about is it something that we observed because of the training, or is it something that we observed just because the recovery was too low? And at the end, I would say it will be really important to have like a close communication between all the coaching staff, analysts, performance staff, that would build and include like role specific programming, because at the end, that's the main finding we will have is not all players will respond the same way to this kind of training. Not players will respond the same way to the recoveries they will have. And first of all, and second of all, the role they will have will impose different demand on them. And so it's right in the ideal world, we would like to think about not adding more work, but building a smarter way and more coordinated ecosystem within the esports environment.
Brilliant. I mean, one last question. Could you make a 45-year-old professor better at Valorant with this program, do you think?
Actually, that's a pretty good question. I would say we could work on some specific stuff, but
Could you give me a six pack? Because if you give me a six pack, I'd volunteer, but that's not going to happen.
I mean,
okay, Clement, thank you so much for taking part in this. If anyone watching or listening to this wants to get in touch with Clement, his details are below the podcast you're listening to or watching. So, Clement, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your invitation.